But mouse, you are not alone in proving foresight may be vain. The best laid schemes of mice and men go often askew, and leave us nothing but grief and pain for promised joy. To a Mouse by Robert Frost. Welcome to the Weekend Devotion. So before we properly begin this week's devotion, I would like to give a big shout out to Jessica Sanders at the church. She has been creating the introduction slides for the YouTube videos for the church, and I asked if she could make one for us, and she came through like a champ. So we look a little more professional this week, so that's great. And I got a fancy new microphone, so that's why I'm shooting this indoors, because why not, right? So for this week, we're continuing a look at lessons that I've learned from working in my front yard or working in the garden or whatever I'm going to call it. I don't know. To recap, I showed you last week what my old yard used to look like. Again, pretty depressing, and there was a lot of talk about whether we rip out everything, weeds and all, and just buy a whole mess load of sod and resod the whole yard right as we started. But then we figured out the cost for doing that, and it quickly fell to the wayside. So instead, we just decided to fertilize what was there and keep adding water. It's amazing what water does to a yard. Now, the kind of grass we have here in South Florida is commonly known as St. Augustine grass. And the way it grows, it's really cool. It sends out these shoots in all different directions. And I call them runners, and that's probably not the right name, but that's what I call them. So that'll work for today. So it sends out runners in different directions, and that's how it spreads itself. Now, most of my yard now has pretty good, decent St. Augustine grass. But on the side yard, on one side of my driveway, I kind of let it go a little bit, so it's kind of regrowing. And here's a picture of these two little runners of St. Augustine that gave me the inspiration for today's video. The interesting thing about these runners is that they're not growing the direction I want them to grow. In a perfect world, they would grow towards my yard and continue to grow in my yard and spread off and keep filling in my yard. Oh, but no, not these two. They're growing towards my neighbor's yard. Go figure. They're not going the way I want them to go. And that's really the story of today. We have great plans for how we would like things to go. The poem by Robert Frost talks about a mouse who has made this burrow in the ground, and a farmer is going to come along and tear it all up, no matter how much the mouse has planned for his own life. And you need to stop and think about how much you have planned for your life and how much that didn't happen. In no way did I think that I was going to be in a church, working for the church, teaching at the church school. There are way better ways to make money in this world. But you know what? It's funny how that works out. It's not our own plans that work out sometimes. It's God's will that works out sometimes. Try as we might, no matter how many doors that God seems to close in our face, sometimes we keep trying to push through those doors, even though God knows it's not good for us. He's got a much better path for us. And sometimes what it takes is simply to listen to what he's trying to say. Here's a great example of listening for God's will, right? I was already debating on doing this topic for this week, but I had another one I was thinking of doing as well. But in the Bible class that I teach, the lesson for the week was how to know when something is God's will. And then just yesterday, I stumbled across a video that I enjoyed about how to understand God's will. And my friends, that's something that we can't ignore when all signs keep pointing in one direction and all signs are pointing in a godly fashion. So what does the Bible have to say about understanding God's will? Well, the whole Bible is understanding God's will. But here's a little verse from Psalms 119. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. God's word shows us where we should be going. God's word is God's will. God's will shows us where we should be going. It shines in the areas where we need to go. God's not going to lead us into darkness and then turn off the light. He's going to keep it going. So if you're walking in a space where you don't know if it's God's will or not, first of all, pray about it. Second of all, look it up. Go see what the Bible has to say about it. And if you find yourself getting dark answers and unclear answers, then you might want to rethink whether or not that's God's will. But if you're thinking about something in your life and trying to figure out if it's God's will or not, you pray about it, you read about it, you talk to other godly people about it. And if God is illuminating your path, don't be afraid to step onto that path. He's not going to lead you down dark hallways. God will be the light shining you in the places where you need to go. He's in control, not you. I want the grass to grow in a certain direction. Pretty sure this is God's earth. It's going to grow how He wants it to grow. So keep that in mind as you go through this week, thinking about what is God speaking for you to do in these uncertain times. How can you illuminate other people's lives? How can His will steer you down a path where you can express His love to others? Have a great week. God bless.